realize how much trouble you've caused me? Spying on me. Almost disturbing my sleep this afternoon. Telling policemen about me! You deserve to die, boy. Of course. I could give you something I don't have. A choice. Forget about me, Charlie. Forget about me, and I'll forget about you. You don't have to be afraid of me. I know what it's like being different. Only they won't pick on you anymore. Or beat you up. I'll see to that. All you have to do is take my hand. Here, Edward. Take my hand.
Hello, and welcome to Comic Book Bears Presents The Bear Cave of Terror. I'm your hairy, heavy homo and horror fan host, Steve Morey. Each week here in the Bear Cave, I invite a horror-loving guest who brings with them one of their favorite scary movies. It can be classic, gory, trashy, obscure, well-known, full of vampires, or something still banned in Britain. In other words, a thrilling work of cinematic terror that we think you might enjoy. In each episode, we'll dig into the flesh and bone of the film, highlighting our favorite scary moments, as well as stories and details from beyond the screen, all while our guest imparts their deep and possibly concerning love for this week's frightful vision unto you, our dear listener. And with me in the Bear Cave for the first time is Mr. Derek Gayle, or Mr. Derek B. Gayle, as his name tag has presented me.
Thank you. Hello. Happy to be here. You're so cool, Brewster.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me and coming in to talk about the movie that you're going to talk about. But first, let's ask you about you. What got you into horror and what do you do?
Yeah. Honestly, this is going to be very, it's going to sound really cheesy. This is the movie that got me into horror. This was absolutely my first. What I do, I guess I'll answer the second part of the question and then go back to the first part. I have a lot of podcasts. I'm with the Glitterjaw Queer Podcast Collective, which is a whole collective of queer creators who talk about media. So we're all media-centric podcasts. I host a handful of Web Snappers, where we do deep dives into Spider-Man cartoons, Skreeonk, where we look at Godzilla films, Falling with Style, where we look at Pixar films and other animated films, Lee Carvalho's Potting Challenge, where we look at Simpsons tie-in video games, and Gimmicks, where we look at high-concept and structure-breaking episodes of television. So horror stuff is crossed over with basically all of those things in one way or another at certain points, funny enough, which is pretty cool. But back to the horror question, I've never considered myself like a horror girly in the way that I know people make horror as a genre like a really core part of their sort of media experience and their personality and stuff, which I think is really cool. And I get, I've never felt like that. I've never felt a kinship with that. But then when I look at all the things that I like everything is either horror or horror adjacent in some way, honestly. So I'm like, maybe I actually am, But I think maybe it's because the stuff that I think has always been most appealing to me in horror are things where the horror almost is sort of incidental or partnered with something else. My favorite horror movie franchises are usually Fright Night and Child's Play and Scream, that are all kind of black comedies and satirical and self-referential and experimental in some ways in how it plays with the genre. Or I like The Fly and The Terminator, stuff like that's sci-fi monster horror, So I think maybe that's why it's always there's always something else attached to the horror of it. Yeah, I mean that's my horror experience. This movie was my first movie that I remember watching that was a horror movie, and I don't remember the first time I watched it because it was since I was a small child, and I would watch this movie over and over.
Oh wow, yeah, I love that Fright Night was the movie to pop your horror cherry because it is it's pretty intense at parts, but it also kind of gives you some false sense of security with some of the humor that goes throughout it. So you're kind of like, oh, I get, there's some jokes. This is funny. This is, oh my God, like
Yeah.
the face, the makeup, the practical effects, and
Right.
the real scares that are in this movie are pretty impressionable for a small child.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know why my parents were totally just cool with letting me watch like whatever I wanted. And I remember specifically having a VHS taped off of TV of this, but I think it was off of probably HBO Free Weekend or something because it still had the boobs in it. It didn't have commercials. And I wore the hell out of that tape. I would just fast forward through the one part with the boobies in it because I was a good Christian child.
That's exactly the only reason why you fast forwarded through the boobies.
The only reason. But I do think that like, weirdly, it is a movie that I do think for a kid, it works because the sex is very, very limited. All the sexual stuff is pretty subtext and implied and things like that. But outside of one moment of breasts on screen, there's like no other real nudity in this movie. And there's not an actual sex scene in it. And then all the violence is usually like monstrous violence between monsters and cool special effects. Like there's some grimy, gross looking stuff in this movie, but I do think there's a difference between seeing a human be stabbed with a knife and seeing a vampire explode into fire. You know what I mean? I do think it's a difference. And so I think all of that stuff really works when you're a kid, and the characters themselves are very, very big in this movie. There's not a lot of them, but everyone has a very, very distinct personality, which makes it really easy to latch onto. And then it's fun to revisit because I think the more I've revisited it, the more I find new things in it and find new things in myself that I realize maybe I responded to that I didn't know when I was a kid. So
absolutely. I can't remember when I first saw this, but it was probably a similar situation. I probably saw it, off of a free weekend from a premium channel, or it potentially could have been on USA late night, in which case it would have been edited. And so I wouldn't have seen any boobies.
Wow.
Not that I minded, but because again, good Christian child, can't see the boobies. But definitely this movie was something that I never forgot after I saw it, and I didn't see it as often. Like I didn't have it as much in my horror rotation, in my VHS rewatch rotation. But it's definitely one that is just memorable as just being good. Like you just remember that you saw it and that you really enjoyed it. And of course, the practical effects stand out and are often referred to in documentaries about horror films over the past 40 years. They're brought up. There's a lot of homages. There was a remake for this film as well. So a lot of people were encouraged to rewatch the original. It's definitely great. But now we're talking around the movie. What is Fright Night about? For those, for people listening who maybe haven't seen it in a long time, or people who haven't seen it, which I'm sure there are some out there. What's kind of the gist of this movie? What's this movie about?
Sure. Fright Night is to classic vampire movies. It is what Scream was to slasher movies, in that it is about 80s teens confronting a classical vampire, specifically like 80s teens who have grown up on Dracula movies and vampire movies and have seen the Hammer horror films and have seen the genre kind of go through multiple phases. And at the point in time this movie came out, vampires were not really treated very seriously. There weren't a lot of vampire movies coming out. So this movie takes place in a universe like our own where people just think vampires are fake and vampire movies are silly. And a teenager played by William Ragsdale in a very rear window type situation starts realizing that his next door neighbor that just moved in actually is a vampire and has to try to convince everyone to believe him to slay the vampire. A lot of other shenanigans, but the other, I think, important part is that a like late night horror host that's kind of a riff on a Vincent Price type figure. William Ragsdale's character is convinced that maybe this guy could actually help him actually slay a vampire. If vampires are real, maybe the guy who plays a vampire killer in a movie might know how to kill a vampire. And that's how he gets involved as well. And then classic vampire stuff ensues. It's like also kind of a Dracula riff. There's definitely some things that are like very heavily riffing on classical Dracula tropes as well. But that's the gist of it. It's like it's a classical Dracula vampire movie, but through this sort of metatextual lens of characters who are self-aware of vampire tropes and vampire movies.
I'd say that is a perfect summary of this movie because, I mean, just reading and listening to what Tom Holland, who is the director as well as the writer for this film, that's the spirit that he wanted to capture. He went back to his own childhood where he was the weird kid in school who loved horror movies. He watched all the Universals. He was around when the Hammer films were coming out, so he saw the revival of these classical universal horror monsters, the Draculas, the vampires, the mummies, the Wolfmans, all that. But then also, while he was in his career as an actor, as a filmmaker, apparently he was also a member of the California bar, so I don't know how he had time to become a lawyer, but at some point.
Sure.
He saw the change, the trajectory of horror through the 70s became one of parody and satire. So especially for vampires. Vampires were then seen as silly. Like there was all these attempts to revive kind of that same feeling that Christopher Lee had captured as Dracula in the 50s and 60s. It just didn't really happen in the 70s. In fact, the Frank Langella remake and everything else, and then it became Once Bit. Like all these parody vampire movies kind of came out. I think he had mentioned at one point in an interview that he saw The Hunger, which was so embarrassed about the fact that it was a vampire movie that it wasn't even mentioned at any point within the film or even in the promotional materials. They're just sort of like, oh, these spooky people who drink blood. Okay. So he was like, this is not what I want to be the legacy of a vampire film. I want to bring back that kind of classic vampire. And I think he succeeded here for sure.
Yeah. I think the sort of genius of this movie is that he's not reinventing vampires, I think, in the way that maybe something like the sort of 30 Days of Night era of vampires did, where it's like, let's make vampires kind of edgy and monstrous. So that's not, and no shade on that or anything. I think that that's a particular type of way that you reinvent a monster. I think what he did here was sort of, let's look at what a classical vampire is, classical in how people saw them in movies, and just put them in a different time period and see like, okay, if that exact same vampire that you've seen in the Hammer films existed in 1985 and had to sort of update what he did and how he acted and how his powers interacted with people in the mid 80s, what would that guy be like? And that's how you get Chris Sarandon's character. There's just a lot of really interesting ways in which his powers sort of are portrayed in the movie that like are still classic vampire powers. They're not changing any of them or changing any of the rules. They're just portraying them slightly differently,
Right. And I think that's actually a really good point, because Holland didn't want to, he didn't want to just splash camp across the screen. And I think that's the danger when you're trying to portray a Dracula type character walking around with a cape, speaking so strangely that people wouldn't, like in the 80s, would just like, what a freak. We're not going near that guy.
Right. Right.
No woman would be seduced by his, by his big coif and like weird accent. So like, as if you are that updated vampire, you're going to change with the style of the times. You're going to follow the fashion of the times. You're going to approach people in that way. That makes more sense. You want to be able to still hunt, and you're not going to be able to if you're walking around going blah blah. So
he's just like a really
works with his portrayal.
Likeable, interesting, good-looking guy. Like Charlie's mom loves him to death. Remember, there's like the line, she's like, "God, he's neat." It's just, and they're just hanging out with Bloody Marys, which I think is one of the funniest little details in the movie, that they're drinking Bloody Marys, and no one comments on the joke that the vampires drinking a Bloody Mary. It's just a subtle little detail. I love it. Like that type of stuff is the type of humor that you get in this movie.
Well, and then also another weird fact that I learned from the documentary was that Chris Sarandon, when he was sort of like thinking up this character, like thinking up how he was going to portray the character, he was looking at the history of vampires and looking at bats. And he was like, well, 9/10 of all the bats in the world are actually fruit bats. And so that's why in this movie, he's constantly eating apples.
It's one of my favorite stupid little anecdotes of Chris Sarandon like overthinking it, but it works. Like there is just something to this guy cleansing his palate after biting a person and killing them, just munching on a little apple.
Yeah, and he does it throughout the movie. There's several times where you see him like, just cutting it up with a penknife or just taking a giant weird bite out of the middle. He's got apples, and you're like, why does he have? But that's the reason why. Like and it makes sense for his character. That it's just one cool sort of quirk that he does. He just like, he knows how to eat an apple.
Holland had a lot of like theater experience. And I think that he was very encouraging of the cast to like really build a real biography of these characters and really build these characters. So even though I think on the page, a lot of these characters are very archetypal, I think every actor bring something so unique and sometimes kind of weird to these characters. So many of Amanda Bearse's line readings are bizarre in this movie, but in a good way, like in a way that makes her feel so distinct. And Stephen Geoffries too. Like, and I think it really helps this movie feel very alive. And so that's how you get stuff where it's just like, he's not just playing a vampire, he's playing a vampire with fruit bat DNA, of course. Like, of course.
And he's just suave and sophisticated and wears just long sleeve shirts sometimes to the club. It's just a very interesting character. And, you know, you can also talk about how he interacts with some of the other characters in this, like his familiar. I guess familiar is the word for it, but his it's
like his Renfield, but also his
Renfield's
roommate, quote unquote, and also his
quote unquote live-in.
Right, exactly. He's referred to as his live-in carpenter at one point. I'm like, none of those things have ever been anything but a euphemism. Like, what are you talking about?
But in the 80s, I'm sure they were like, well, of course, he's some yuppie dude with a lot of money and lots of antiques, and he's got his live-in carpenter. Jonathan Stark, the actor who played that, Billy Cole is the character. There is some interesting, obvious, not so obvious sort of subtext like this could be a queer relationship. But also Tom Holland didn't necessarily want to put that front and center because, again, most, you know, in the way that he was writing it, it was just more of a master-servant relationship. But there are some very, I would say, sensual blocking that sometimes happens in a few moments.
Yeah. I think the really, I was like, earlier when I was talking, I was like, do I want to like just like crack this nut right now and getting into this, or to hold it? Because like that's a whole thing. Like the second that you start beginning to have any semblance of a queer reading of the movie, like everything becomes so clear and everything changes. And I think it's like some of the stuff was intentional. There are a few things that definitely were, and there's a lot that wasn't, but there's a lot that's sort of informed by the actors who are playing these characters, and the time period it's taking place. And that then like this movie is like ridiculously gay when you're looking for that stuff. It's bananas. Like every time I watch it, there's something else that I'm like, this fucking vampire literally came out of this dude's closet. Like when he's in Charlie's room, he literally is hiding in the closet and comes out of the closet behind him. Like even down to little things like that were definitely not intentional. But like the couple of things that are enough to then set the dominoes falling. Cause like the big thing is the relationship between Jerry and Billy, the vampire and his familiar / ghoul / Renfield / whatever he is. But like they're so handsy with each other. There's like that moment when they're on the stairs and Chris Sarandon just like wraps his arms around his shoulders and puts his head on his shoulder. It's just like that's a married couple. Like they are partners. But like even
they're best of friends.
They're the best of friends. But like everything about their relationship, and a lot of that stuff was intentional from Holland. And like one of my favorite anecdotes is the fact that like Jonathan Stark and Chris Sarandon like didn't know that until they watched the movie and were like, oh my god, you were making us look so gay. Holy shit. What is it? There's like a point when Charlie is looking at it's when Chris Sarandon's on the phone with Charlie. You see him through the window, his hand is bleeding, and then they have Billy Cole like lean down in a way that really makes it look like he's about to go down on him. And like that was blocked intentionally, like to be able to look like that.
And absolutely. I mean, there's some I would say you would have to be pretty oblivious not to pick up on some of the queer coding stuff. But I think probably one of my favorite sort of queer pairings on screen is between Evil Ed and Peter Vincent. So Roddy McDowell's character, Peter Vincent, and Stephen Geoffries' Evil Ed. There are moments where these two interact alone. And that happens, of course, after Evil Ed is turned into a vampire, and also a very coded segment.
Yes.
The two of them on screen together, they start off with very antagonistic, like Ed is just going for him, and Peter Vincent uses his cross, and he burns the cross into his forehead, and he's screaming and running out the window. And then the second pairing, where Ed is dressed as Raggedy Ann, I guess. He's pretending to be Charlie's mother in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And he like pops up and he takes the wig off, and he's in sort of like mid-transformation into a werewolf character, like a wolf character. Attacks Peter Vincent, and Peter Vincent kills him. But that death scene is incredible.
It's that has stuck the dog sounds or the wolf, the sad wolf sounds that it makes, and the multi-stage designs of that wolf as he dies slowly, like, have always stuck with me.
Detransition from like wolf to human. Yeah.
And like, what a wild move to have like one of your biggest effects sequences, your most complicated effect sequences, be the death of a character, like the very prolonged, stretched out death of a character. Like, it's such a wild idea, but I think it works because not only does it look fucking cool and like gross, but it makes his death feel really, really sad and like more earned, I think.
It has an impact to it, a very emotional impact. And, you know, I credit Roddy McDowell here because he, you know, storied actor. He's been acting since he was a little boy, but he takes all of that experience. And I think also because these are two gay actors.
Yes.
I don't know if
Stephen Geoffries was not out at the time, but I think he knew that he was, but I don't think he was out at the time.
Yeah. And Roddy McDowell it was like, you know, open knowledge, I think, through most of Hollywood because he had, you know, decades of being out to friends and people within the industry. And there was a tension, apparently, according to Tom Holland, there was a tension on set between the two of them that was kind of, you know, straight man trying to figure out two gay dudes, I guess. But like, I don't think Holland didn't know that Stephen Geoffries was gay. I think that interaction, or at least their own, you know, the fact that they were both gay men kind of informed that death scene a little bit.
I think so.
Where you have Roddy McDowell, this established older gay man, watching the death of this young gay man who came out explosively, if you want to talk about his transition to a werewolf vampire.
Absolutely.
And now is dying because of it. And here's Roddy McDowell, the survivor, someone who has lived through, you know, decades of being a gay man oppressed or, you know, kept down or whatever. Watching it as an adult, as an openly gay adult man, and I've been out for 25 years now, versus, you know, young 10-year-old me watching this, very different impact, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the older that I've gotten, every time I revisit this, I realize how young Stephen Geoffries is and reads as Ed. And I think it makes it all so much sadder. And I think when I was a kid, I was always like, oh yeah, he's like Charlie's best friend. And then I watch it now and I'm like, this kid is treated like shit the entire movie. Everyone is so mean to him. Right. And Charlie does not seem to give a fuck about him. Like, I don't think they're actually friends. I think they just are around each other is how it feels like. And so it ends up feeling so much more powerful, I think, when this kid who was just trying to kind of help his friend deal with what he thought was a mental breakdown continued to get bullied by this person he thought was his friend, then encounter this vampire who's like, hey, come with me. No one's going to beat you up anymore. No one's going to make fun of you anymore. You're not going to be alone. Come out of the closet, enjoy the family. And he's like, all right, man. To then, just like so shortly after, the second that he comes out, he barely gets to do anything as a vampire before he's completely disfigured by the crossburn on his head and then murdered by the other very clearly queer person in the cast. It's so upsetting. It's so upsetting.
It is. You know, Jerry Dandridge basically corners him in a dark alley and says, come with me, take my hand. No one's going to hurt you again. I know what it's like to be you. This put upon, the weirdo, the outcast, whatever, who's never taken seriously. And there is something very queer about that line where it's like, here, come with me. I recognizes like I see something is in you that you've been tortured or bullied about. Let's bring it out and we'll make sure that you're safe. You know, join my community, join the family. And then here's Peter Vincent, who has had decades of whatever, being an outsider essentially himself, being responsible for his death.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think a lot of this movie is like, if you want to, like, the core queer reading I think you could have that works a little bit, doesn't work throughout the entire thing, is like the horror is straight people being afraid of the gays moving into their neighborhood and taking away their children, basically. That's definitely not the intention, but like I do think if you're trying to find like what is meant to be scary about this movie, that's kind of what it is, right? Like, because even the main vampires are like enticing Amanda Bearse's character, who's this young teenager who's grappling with, am I ready to have sex or not? And just being like, well, come over here. We're fucking down with sexuality on our end, man. Let's show you how it works, which is every like, you know, Christian parent's nightmare, right? So
yeah, Amanda Bearse's character, I love Amy because I think that, again, and this is no shade against William Ragsdale, who plays Charlie, the main character. Amy is also kind of treated a little bit like shit by Charlie as well. He ignores, like, he's kind of he's pressuring her. Well, not kind of. He's definitely pressuring her for sex at the beginning of the movie. She's sort of deciding that she might be ready for it. And as soon as she like takes her top off, he's distracted by some two guys, you know, out the window moving a coffin. And she's like, what the hell, Charlie? Like, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then even when she tries to sort of like come, to meet sort of in the middle ground when they're at that cool teen 80s diner that is in so many movies, he's still ignoring her. He's, busy with his own things. He doesn't really want to listen to her. And so she smashes a chili burger in his face and walks off. And yet she still keeps coming back because she truly loves this kid, or, whatever teenage version of love you can have.
Yeah.
Like, truly loves this kid, and she's worried about him. And each time he's just kind of like, you just don't get me, man. I'm like, Amanda Bearse putting on the strong, Amy putting on a strong front here this whole time. I think she wasn't being mesmerized or glamored by Dandridge. I think she's just sort of like, this dude actually cares and is paying attention to me.
Right. He actually like looks at me.
My boyfriend is
and,
not.
Yeah, he looks at me and seems to think that I'm pretty. Like, wow.
Yeah. He wants to dance with me in this dance club while my boyfriend's like trying to call people on the phone. Like,
trying to call Peter Vincent his gay friend. Like
his old gay friend, it's just like, oh, man, I can't get anything from this guy. But this guy, he even gives me a new dress. He gives me hair extensions. Like,
yeah,
dude knows how to do a weave. Like, I am in awe. I love this man now. Yes, he made me turn into sort of like a crazy shark monkey face by the end, but he has my best interest in heart.
Yeah. I really enjoy Amy as a character because I think she's well written in that, yes, she becomes the damsel in distress at the end, and they do the sort of a textbook like vampire romance thing, and like, oh, you're the descendant of a lady that I loved or something like that. Like, whatever. So barely matters in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, who cares? They have that with her, but so much of the movie is her just trying to like save her insane, stupid boyfriend. Like, so much of that is driven by her. The only reason Peter Vincent is involved in the last half of the movie at all is her being like, no, dude, you're the only person that can help us deal with this right now. Take my $500.
It's my savings bond, Oh my gosh. Like, that was probably a gift from her grandmother in the 70s.
Man.
You give that up for your boyfriend.
Yeah. But I love her performance though, because it's like I said, it's such a strange performance. I think she was so smartly cast because I think she was like 26 at the time. She was the oldest, I think, out of the three teenagers.
Really?
I believe.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
But I think it was intentional because then she can play basically the vampire version of herself. It's just her playing her actual age. So when she's playing the teen version, she's like pitching her voice up. Which I think is why she just sounds so straight. Like, Amanda Bearse has a very particular voice. All of her line readings in this movie are strange. And I think it's to make her sound more childlike so that it's more striking when the vampire kind of awakens this adult sexuality in her in the second half of the movie, And
it certainly awakens it all over the screen. It is fantastically awake at that point. I mean, that transformation, I think, is just as well done without a lot of practical effects, at first, seeing her become a woman.
It's
and
so
obviously
cool.
there's the sexual, version of that where she, he bites her and it's like he's popping, he's, breaking her hymen. That's what the blood's supposed to signify, at least according to Tom Holland. So I'm like, okay. But it does, it does mark the transition from her as like a teenage girl to someone who's going through full womanhood. And I think skipping straight to menopause with the hot flashes, but and then she comes back. It's just it's interesting. She overshot a little, came back. But I love that, and the fact that Amanda Bearse is, she wasn't at the time, but she is, proud out lesbian. I'm wondering how much of that internalized femininity came out in her performance. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. That is a good question. She's always been the one that I have ever, when I'm thinking through the queer lens, it's always the men, and I've never really. It's harder for her, I think, because she's like trapped between all of these men who are trying to do stuff with her sexually. But I do think that there is something to this teen girl realizing that all the men who are that she's trying to either get with sexually or trying to get with her sexually, all of them kind of suck in their own way, and she has become her own woman herself. I just need to become my own version of a hot lady, and through a nightclub sequence, suddenly my blouse turns silk and my hair gets blown out and everything.
She got that perm between Avenue C and but it's just, it is really interesting with her. And I absolutely love her performance. And one of the cool things is that she and Stephen Geoffries had worked right before this on a movie where Stephen Geoffries, I think it was like Fraternity Vacation or something, where Stephen Geoffries was the main character. He was a nerdy guy trying to get the hot girl, and she was the hot girl.
I don't think I realized that. That's awesome.
Yeah. So they knew each other before this, and they had acted with each other. So you can almost see a little bit of that comfort and sort of just ability to play off each other when they both go to Peter Vincent's house. And there's just that sort of rapport that happens where you're almost like, I thought everybody hates Evil Ed, and yet she and Ed, these two people going to help Charlie, who is presumably Charlie's best friend and presumably her boyfriend, they're the ones that are really good together.
Such a good point. Yeah, that's such a good point.
And of course, it's the two gay actors,
right? The lesbian and the gay guy are actually are great together. Yeah, that's so funny.
That's just more trivia, I guess, than anything else. But
I think it does make an impact on this movie, though. I do think that's one of the it's one of those cases where I do think the queerness of the cast really does seep into the movie itself. I don't think the movie would have been as good if you didn't have this cast and you didn't have that sort of queer subtext layered throughout it, even if it doesn't always line up if you're trying to do a literal reading of it or whatever. I think it makes the movie just feel a lot more interesting and more complex.
Also, a weird fact that I guess Charlie Sheen had read for one of the roles.
Yeah.
And if you could picture Charlie Sheen as Evil Ed, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, that would have been awful.
Even Stephen Geoffries was reading for Charlie, and they were like, "Oh no, you are perfect for this Evil Ed character." And he's like, "What do you mean? Because your line readings are insane."
Truly.
Push at it, and their heads were removed from their body. Oh my God, no one else could deliver that line in that way.
He's a character that could be so annoying in the wrong hands. And it's a miracle that he isn't.
And also seeing, looking at it from an outsider lens, not just a queer lens, but an outsider lens, he and Charlie are essentially very similar in their interests. Charlie's huge into horror movies. He loves horror movies, but he's also cute enough that he can get the girl.
Yeah.
Whereas Evil Ed is he's totally into horror movies, but he's just that side of weird and just can't crossover. And so everybody bullies him, including his best friend. It's straight outsider versus gay outsider.
Oh my God,
the straight one has something going for him that makes him socially acceptable, whereas the gay one is trapped in this sort of outsider space where he will always be considered a queer other.
Yeah. That's such a great reading of that relationship. Yeah.
But there's so much else to love about this movie too. We're talking about practical effects earlier with that transition, but
it's really I think it's incredible how well this movie holds up with its effects too. I think what's smart about it is that I think they keep the scale relatively small, and it's just very specific points of really cool special effects, and every supernatural character gets something really distinctive about them. Billy Cole gets his whole disintegration into a skeleton moment. Ed gets his wolf sequence. Amy gets hits her shark mouth. And obviously Jerry gets a bunch of vampire shit. Everybody has something that you can sort of point to be that's their cool special effect. And I know that I forget what the name of the group is, but like they got people who worked on Ghostbusters to do a lot of these special effects, but do it on a way smaller budget, which I think is really incredible.
I would say maybe the disinterest of Columbia Pictures is
Yeah.
fully to thank for that, because again, it was Boss Film Corporation.
That's right.
Which is Richard Edlund's special effects house. They basically had just blown huge amounts of money making everything look awesome for the Ghostbusters, and along comes this little film that Columbia's just sort of like, you guys aren't busy right now. Why don't you go help them out, make it look a little bit better? And they made it look incredible. You're looking at blockbuster experience and crafts materials and creativity, but on a relatively low budget picture.
Yeah, and it does not, you do not feel the low budget. I think the most low budget this movie ever feels is just how few locations there are. Like how much time they spend in the house, just running back and forth down the same hallway. And I'm like, okay, you've checked on Amy like 4 times, maybe go somewhere else. But like, other than that, the actual the effect sequence is all stellar every single time. I was even like reading with Amy's like shark mouth. That was a last minute decision that they like threw together in a couple of days. And the guy who did it was sort of like, no, it looks like shit. I hate that that's the cover of the movie. And it looks amazing. What are you talking about? Like,
it's why it's the post. It's like, it's the one sheet. It's
like the image of the movie. And you thought that was your less good work? Like you thought that was the bottom tier? Like, God damn, man.
It's amazing. Like anytime that I think about Fright Night, I see that image, that poster. I mean, that VHS cover, to be honest,
good.
I'm that old, you know, that's, like the VHS cover, you can't not be drawn to that. And the fact that effect, that makeup effect doesn't appear until like the very climax of the film, towards the end, where she has that amazing reveal where she turns around, she's like, you promised that you would keep me safe and you would whatever. And then she turns around and it's like,
yeah. Yeah. It's such a cool aspect of this movie that they sort of find a way to reinvent vampires without really reinventing them, in that all the stuff is the same. Vampires are like demon monsters with big sharp teeth, but it's like, what if we just like took that to the extreme? So all of these like monstrous effects and everything, but it still feels true to vampires, where it's like vampires have sharp teeth and sometimes have creepy eyes. So it's like, what if we just took that up to 11? And it's like, what if they had a lot of sharp teeth with a really big mouth? So you end up getting this movie where like vampires are really monstrous in a really cool way, but still feel like vampires at the same time. They don't feel too far away from what they are. And I think that like works for the movie. Like the fact that Jerry has multiple stages of his vampire monster form that still feel vampire-esque, but also feel very new at the same time and make them scarier and more grotesque and things.
Yeah, I actually really appreciated that, because I think that's where we sort of really get into a modern interpretation of a vampire creature, by making it more of a monster instead of just a really smartly dressed dude with pointy teeth, which really, I mean, like, you know, historically, going back to Bela Lugosi, you know, Bela Lugosi himself was a very cultured and handsome in a Eastern European kind of way vampire character. So slicked back hair, lots of really fancy clothes, a big cape, because of course. And that's from just 10 years prior to that, or actually less than 10 years prior to that, you had Nosferatu.
Right.
Who was monstrous in appearance from the get-go. Hideous, bizarrely shaped head, pointy ears, long clawed fingernails, and the pointy teeth. And filmmakers have been getting away from that, you know, starting in the 30s. So like you wanted somebody who could be believable as a seductive character. How would anybody go to this hideous monster character? They're hideous. There's no way that they would attract victims. But a lot of the Dracula version of a vampire is that they're so attractive that women or men or whatever are drawn to them. And so with Bela Lugosi, and from there, Christopher Lee, oh my God, you know.
Yeah.
Just beautiful man at the time, being that figure. And even the Frank Langella version of Dracula, the American remake in the 70s, very handsome man, even when being a vampire.
Right. And then this movie, they're able to play it both ways because he's a
Absolutely.
handsome man, but when he's a creature, he's a nasty looking creature. Like yeah,
hair just gets all stringy. The face gets, bloated and textured in weird ways.
Yeah.
And he looks less and less human to the point where he actually turns into a giant demon bat thing.
So cool. It's so
which is really cool.
cool.
That puppet, oh man.
My
I mean, that
God.
was, talk about practical effects. That puppet was gorgeous.
Have you ever seen the images of what it looked like on set? How big that thing actually is?
It was huge.
It's
the wingspan was like, what, 15 feet or something crazy?
It was something like that. It's ridiculously big. Yeah. It's like, it would be scary if you saw it in person in real life, even as a puppet. It's so cool. But it's also so smart because it's like, I like that they don't just be like, vampires turning into bats is silly. They're like, no, vampires turn into bats will make the bat fucking scary.
It's going to be terrifying. His transformations start off as relatively subtle. So it's like it's all in the hands. He gets these long claws that...
beautifully manicured nails.
Very, well... I don't know. Maybe you should have gone with like a different nail technician, to be honest. But then, of course, the teeth. And it's not just two little pointed canines. There's some undergrowth, that's happening too. Yeah. And his eyes get not just bloodshot, but just weirdly large and giant pupils and irises. And
yeah, the eye stuff in this movie with all the vampires is really cool. I know that they were really working hard to innovate with the contact lenses that were incredibly painful to wear because they were just like... hard plastic. But I know like one of the things that they wanted, originally they were like, let's make it fluorescent or something like that. Couldn't pull it off. They ended up painting glitter on it, which sounds so silly, but I think when you see it in camera, it makes so much sense. There's this eerie glimmering that their eyes will do sometimes that with the huge irises and tiny pupils and the messed up faces around it, there's just this contradiction in their face because of that, that makes them so much creepier.
Oh, 100%. I really appreciated that they went through those stages, that they went from a relatively, I would say, a classic vampire look, like, okay, we still look very human, but now we have sharp teeth, to something that's so inhuman that really emphasizes the fact that these are monsters. These are creatures. They're not just, I'm a fancy dressed dude that sometimes turns into a bat. Like it is like, I am a fancy dressed dude until I start really giving into the creature, giving to the monster, and then I look like it.
Right.
So cool of a concept, but hadn't really been explored all that much prior to that. It was either they're just all monsters all the time, or they're just
beautiful men.
Beautiful, well-dressed, manicured men.
Right.
Stay away from them. They're all vampires. You want a schlub. They're not vampires.
That's so cool. It's so cool. Yeah. Everything in this movie is so cool.
But yeah, I mean, this film is just so much fun. There's so much to it. And I know we haven't really talked a lot about Roddy McDowell.
Oh God, but he is such a scene stealer in this movie.
He is.
Like he's so good. And the idea of doing a Vincent Price analog that I know that they were like hoping they could get Vincent Price for, and I do think that he was still like flattered, and I think he commended Roddy McDowell for his performance for it and everything. He still gave his endorsement for it. I think Peter Vincent's name was supposed to be Peter Cushing and Vincent Price combined together. But I like that he didn't go in intending to do a Vincent Price impression. It's more like, what would a character like Vincent Price be if he never had any success in his life? It was actually really, really bad at acting and was like a total coward. That's kind of how he plays it. And I think he like ripped on like the Cowardly Lion from The Wizard of Oz, that type of performance, which like makes him feel so much more cartoony, but so much more lovable. He's so animated in this movie. It's such a joy to watch.
His delivery, and of course, I would say, and I credit, again, Tom Holland going through and looking at this as well. Peter Vincent is playing a very particular character that we really don't have anymore.
Right.
It's something that for most people know who Elvira is. Most people might know nowadays like who Svengoolie is, just because they kind of had that revival. Oh my gosh, Elvira's just been amazingly fabulous all the time. Like one of the most successful AFAB drag queens out there. But she's
great. She's fantastic. Since
I was a kid. Yeah. Like I was like, I'm not fascinated with her boobs. I'm just fascinated with her hair and everything. Oh my God, she's fabulous. But anyway.
And only proven herself to be a cooler and cooler person as time has gone on, honestly.
Yes. And the great thing, like, she was always cool, but like now we appreciate the coolness even more. Most people at that time in the mid 80s anyway, like that whole sort of genre of late night horror host was kind of dying out. And until like a Joe Bob Briggs comes along, or even USA Up All Night kind of sort of is a little bit like that. But there used to be this, every local station had their own horror host that would have a character that would do this kind of delivery where it'd be over the top, super melodramatic with lots of cheap prop sets like, plastic skeletons or something all over the place, maybe a plywood coffin that they would crawl out of. It was just like, it was a thing, and everybody who liked horror, this was how they watched it.
Right.
If it wasn't playing at like in a special revival at a movie theater, like they were watching it late at night with these horror hosts kind of giving their stupid jokes and, whatever. And Roddy McDowell just embodies that. But even then, his character reveals, oh, I've just been fired. Nobody wants to watch monster movies anymore. They just want slashers.
It's just such a funny thought now. It is weird nowadays realizing that there was a time when like there wouldn't always be some sort of vampire movie existing.
Right.
We're never going to have it. Even with the waves that we've gotten, there's never going to be a point when you think that vampires as a genre is dead. I think it's like pretty much a permanent thing now. So it's really interesting to think about a time where it's just like, nah, man, Freddy Krueger and Jason just killed vampires. Like they don't exist anymore. It's so funny.
Really, Freddy Krueger, Jason, Michael Myers, like that was it. Like that's what people really wanted. Now, of course, in the movie theaters, the stuff that you would see that was promoted, obviously on video, is a different story. You had a lot of really cool stuff happening. But I mean, to a point, slashers were kind of taken over. And Peter Vincent just kind of is like, well, this was like the last gasp of that horror host. And Roddy McDowell being able to present that, and even the set dressing in his little Hollywood area apartment. Perfect. Just, crosses and stuff, like props on the wall, props in cases, props everywhere. That was his life.
Yeah.
And
so cool.
It's just, and Roddy McDowell just really, even his interactions with, okay, I guess I need to give you an autograph, right? Just an autograph, like acting like it's some kind of course, inevitability, but even also at the same time, it's an act because he knows that he's forgotten. Like he doesn't, it's this weird dynamic with this character that's just so many layers, and I love it.
Yeah.
And I can't picture anybody else in that role, really.
No, he makes that role. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. He's so incredible in it. The only other things that I want to bring up, I think the soundtrack to this movie absolutely fucks. It's so good. I think that's one of the reasons the nightclub sequence is really good. I think the score by Brad Fiedel, who also did the first two Terminator movies, one of my favorite composers just because of those three movies. Iconic. I think that's another thing that's always stuck with me. And the Come to Me song, like the sort of creepy romance theme throughout it. If you listen to the official soundtrack, you can listen to it with lyrics, which is really cool. Yeah, there's a lyrical version of it that I think Brad Fiedel does, like actually sings the lyrics to it. That song has always stuck with me because it's such a compelling song.
Thinking about how much this movie benefited from the creative production teams that you expect to see on a big blockbuster movie, on a movie that the studio is like putting all of their weight behind. And they just kind of let Fright Night do whatever and get all of the benefit of a great composer, a great soundtrack specialist, and this great special effects house. And Jan Kieser is the cinematographer, and Holland had talked about who he just kind of let Jan do his thing. They would pump smoke in, a lot of smoke.
Yeah.
So much smoke. But it would capture the light in a way and would refract the light in a way that looked fantastic. It was anamorphic, which allowed them to do some really interesting focus in the foreground and just leave some other things like out of focus in particular ways that were really interesting. That's something you wouldn't see in a smaller budget movie.
Yeah.
Where the cinematography is just that cool. Everything that went into making this movie is what would normally go into making a Ghostbusters.
Yes.
And instead it all went into this R-rated movie that somehow became the massive classic that it is because it has all these elements that make its ambition so much bigger than the original intention of the movie was. So, and I think Holland trying to like reinvigorate the vampire concept and vampire movies for a new generation, he 100% succeeded with this movie.
He totally did. I think so well that I do think that a lot of times like vampire stuff that came after this, I think overshadows this in people's
Mhm.
memory. Like people cite the Lost Boys and stuff like that, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes kind of forget about Fright Night. Sometimes which I think is just sort of odd. I think maybe because it was the first to do this sort of thing, and to be so like self-referential and sort of metatextual about this too. Like I'm sure that to some extent or another there had been horror movies that had done that, but specifically with like a classical universal horror type character to do it like that, I think
Yeah.
was really cool.
Absolutely. Just being able to represent one of the oldest Hollywood monsters in a way that felt so fresh and felt so new without necessarily reinventing the wheel, but presenting another spoke of it, I guess. If you will.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah
Yeah.
metaphors.
Yeah,
But it's
sure.
just like, it's really,
Yeah.
it is really fantastic. And I agree. Like, I think a lot of movies that came after this that really do I think a lot of the seriousness that they presented their subject matter with and the success that they had is thanks to Fright Night.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Have you seen part 2 by any chance?
So I have not. I have not seen part 2.
Many people have not, to be fair. So for unfortunate reasons. The movie is good. I really like Fright Night Part 2. It's a different movie than this one, but it's way campier and way gayer in different ways in this movie. But there's so much interesting history behind it that can be its own podcast. Like
All of the rights had been like passed from like studio to studio to studio. And the last one to have it was, I believe, was it Live Entertainment? So they were going to have a third film. There was going to be a Fright Night 3 afterwards. The rights were held by Live Entertainment, which the president, Jose Menendez, you might recognize his name. He has 2 sons, Lyle and Eric. And unfortunately,
that's the murder.
there was a bit of an incident, a domestic incident, and that plan just folded because so did the company with the CEO murdered. So yeah, there could have been a Fright Night 3 with Tom Holland at the helm if it weren't for that incident with the
I don't know much about the actual murder itself, but like I just know that incident affected Fright Night Part 2, making it impossible to find at a certain point, and was like never distributed really substantially, and like you would never see it on TV. So like a lot of people don't even know that it exists, and I didn't even see it for a long time because I feel like the reputation was, I just assumed that it wasn't good because the few people who saw it said they didn't like it, and most people haven't even seen it or found it. And then I watched it like a few years ago. This movie fucking rules. Actually, it's really good. I think it is coming to physical media this year. I think they finally figured out a rights thing to make it happen. So it's going to eventually be released.
Yeah, that would be really good because I am interested in seeing it eventually. And again, I think I had the same sort of, misconception about it. Was like, oh, Fright Night 2. Well, I've never seen it on TV. I've never really, I think I may have spotted it on like a shelf once at the video store, but like, I don't know anyone who's seen it. But it was picked up eventually, made its way back to, or made its way to Sony, I believe. And that's why they ended up with the remake in 2011 with
Tony Collette, Anton Yelchin, Colin Farrell is the vampire in it. Yeah, I like the remake. It's a very different movie than this. But I do think that they had a clever take on, like, if the original movie was 80s kids dealing with a classical vampire, what if like 2000s kids dealt with the sort of 30 Days of Night style vampire that they grew up with? Like that, I think that take is really clever.
It doesn't have the same kind of lasting legacy that Fright Night
100%
from 1985 has.
I totally
and deservedly
agree.
so. Deservedly so. I have to say, thank you so much for bringing Fright Night to the Bear Cave of Terror, because I don't think I would have talked about it otherwise, even though I also love this movie. Yeah, I mean, it's not one that comes up in a lot of conversations, unfortunately.
Yeah.
When talking about horror movies, I think people kind of talk around it, like they talk about stuff that came out in the early 80s or stuff that was in the later 80s. But with vampire movies, it's like we either go classic or we go to the new style, or Lost Boys and later. It's like, boom. Wasn't that their one in 85 that was really good?
And I think they kind of nailed it. They kind of nailed it with this one, like in a way that a lot of other movies have still not. So
yeah. Oh, fantastic. It's just so much fun. And, I absolutely, again, if people haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a while, go and re-watch it.
Yes,
it is
it's fantastic.
It is worth the time. It's worth the hour and a half that you'll be spending watching it with the lights down and in total darkness with your surround sound. You've just listened to another episode of the Bear Cave of Terror. And if you haven't seen Fright Night from 1985, or after listening to us, are struck with an irresistible compulsion to watch it again, I don't think it's streaming free at the moment, unfortunately, but it is definitely for sale or rent at your favorite online retailer or streamer, and still available on physical media in some places. And Derek, if listeners would like to get in touch, how would they do that?
Sure, you can find me in most places at Derek B. Gayle, and all my podcasts you can find at glitterjaw.com.
Excellent. And if you want to, you can also follow the Bear Cave of Terror on Blue Sky and Instagram at Bear Cave of Terror, all in one word, or send an email to bearcaveofterror@gmail.com if you still use email. A list of sources will be available in the show notes if you'd like to learn more about the original Fright Night. And remember, if the choice is between demented men in ski masks hacking up virgins or a suave dude with a living carpenter and a taste for apples, I think you know which option we'll take. Good night, everybody.
Oh, you're so cool, Brewster. I can't stand